everyone. This is Nina. Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. Sorry, I said I was going to be consistent and I ended up taking off another week, so that's my bad. And also on Tuesday, I had some really bad car trouble. I went to start my car to come here, and when I went to do that, it wouldn't start, and I had to end up jumping it. It was just such a mess. And we ended up trying to jump it and got it just 0.1 volt shy of being able to start, and I ended up having to call roadside assistance, and they're the ones who told me that when they actually jumped it and successfully got it running. But regardless, that's neither here nor there. I'm sorry I wasn't here on Tuesday. I'm sorry I wasn't here last week, but I promise I have a great show for you all. I'm still waiting to be able to see the stream on my iPad. I'm not sure why I can't see it right now. Hopefully I'll be able to jump in and see the live chat at some point. But regardless, I can still start talking about what I have on deck for tonight. So the first thing I want to talk about is what I would propose for a new wave of feminism. And then I'll get into some more special topics in my property manifesto. I kind of laid out the foundation for the 4 kinds of property. We talked about property of body, property of mind, obviously real property, and private property. So tonight we'll get into some special issues, and I'm going to talk about abortion. So yay, that'll be nice and controversial. So yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later, and then I'll close out with something a little bit more lighthearted, which is a little bit about the story of St. Valentine for all of those people out there who hate Valentine's Day and are always saying, oh, this is just a commercial holiday. It is actually the feast day of St. Valentine, and as it's tomorrow, I thought I could talk about that. But let's first start with a new feminism. So, you know, feminism right now has a very bad reputation, and partially because of the current wave that we're in, I think. Obviously, there's a lot of people who popularized the phrase feminism is cancer. I mean, that was kind of Milo who first started with that. But that's sort of been adopted not just by people who are conservative or right-wing like Milo, but a lot of people kind of have an opinion about feminism. I don't know, Edgar, what do you think about feminism right now?
I think it's bonkers.
Right.
Plain and simple. Just right now in its current form, it's bonkers, and I think it's more counterproductive than anything else.
Right, yeah, and I think that that's part of the issue that I have with the current wave, because I actually, especially with the first and second waves of feminism, I would call myself a feminist, and in terms of those waves. But this current wave, and I don't know, people say that we might be in the 4th wave already, and maybe we are, but I still kind of view us as in the 3rd wave, and I'll go through the problems with that. But let's just talk briefly about the first 2 waves, so we can understand what we mean by feminism. So the first wave of feminism really started in the early 1900s, and this is one that I think almost everyone in America would be on board with in terms of what they were able to achieve, which was women's suffrage, right? The right to vote. Even if you think about Mary Poppins, right? It's like, well done, sister suffragettes. So the whole idea is women up until that point didn't have the right to vote. And I don't know if you all know this, but part of why they were pushing for the right to vote so hard was actually going hand in hand with prohibition. Feminists were actually part of the reason, or the major reason, why prohibition was even passed in this country, because they claimed that the alcohol was making their husbands violent, and you know, they were suffering all this abuse at home because the men supposedly were getting too drunk, and so we just needed to ban alcohol, and that would stop all this domestic violence and yada yada. So that actually is part of prohibition, but that all kind of happened at the same time, and we got women's suffrage, which is a big deal. I'm in favor of that. I'm proud of my suffragette, like lady ancestors, for doing that for women in this country. The second wave happened more so during the sexual revolution in the 60s and 70s. You'll remember when I talked about the 4th turning, that was the awakening, right? It was that part of our cycle. It was the spring part. It was the summer part of the cycle and the seculum, right? So that was the awakening. It was the sexual revolution. And in this wave, it really wasn't about legal rights for women as much as it was about cultural rights, so to speak. So, you know, women in college would have a curfew and men didn't. And Camille Paglia would say that part of what women were fighting for in the second wave was, you know, we're fighting for the right to risk rape. You know, we're fighting for the right to be able to be out at night and take those risks and wear what we want, and we have our own sexuality and our own sensual side as well. We want to be able to express that, and that's kind of where the second wave came in. And I think that's all well and good too. I think that for a long time, women were sort of treated as if we needed to stay home. You know, the second wave was sort of in response to the 50s, where women kind of had this this expectation that they might be a housewife or a stay-at-home mom or something like that. And so the 60s and 70s it says, no, we're going to free ourselves from this idea that that's what a woman has to be. A woman can have a career, a woman can be out in the world, a woman doesn't just have to be at home raising kids and, you know, cooking dinner and having her foot soaking in a bathtub because she's been on her feet in front of the stove all day. So yeah, I'm in favor of that too. Women should be able to make whatever choices they want in terms of their career, their lives. If they want to stay home and be a mom, that should be up to them too. But if they want to be, you know, kind of more wild with that, like Sex and the City style, that is their freedom to do so. But that brings us to our current wave, which is everything okay?
I think your hair is messing up the microphone.
Oh, here,
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, audience. I still can't see the live chat, so sorry about that. I'll stop touching here, hopefully. It'll be okay. And that brings us to the current wave, which the biggest problem I have with the current wave is that ultimately it's erasing womanhood, okay? And I know that that's a pretty bold claim, so I'll take a step back and try to explain what I mean by that. The idea that what it means to be a woman is just a matter of subjective whim is really a problem. And it's not to say that, you know, my trans listeners, that I understand what you're going through, and I understand that you know, you're transitioning between the two sexes, and it's a hard place to be, and I think that you should have every right to do that. You know, that's your property of body for you to be able to go through that process, and however you present to me is pretty much how I'll address you in real life. But the idea that what it means to be a woman is no longer based on biology, but it's based on either subjective whim or stereotypical things like the fact that that individual likes to wear dresses or likes to wear makeup or, you know, does their nails or has long hair. That's what being a woman is, versus rather that you have two X chromosomes, or that, you know, you have a vagina or, you know, breasts or something like that, or even, you know, this whole idea that men can have periods too. Has been popularized a lot in this current wave. So, but my question is, if men can have periods too, if men can get pregnant too, then what does it mean to be a woman even? Is it just wanting to wear a dress? Wanting to do feminine things? Because that seems like the opposite of what feminism was trying to achieve. I thought this whole idea that all women kind of have to be the same, or that all women are feminine, all women are dainty, all women want to, you know, be stay-at-home moms. Like that kind of idea, we didn't want those stereotypes to apply to women anymore. We wanted the definition of woman to be expanded. But I think that it's been expanded so much that now it just doesn't mean anything. And if being a woman doesn't mean anything, then feminism serves no purpose. I don't know. That's kind of my problem that I see with the current way. What do you think, Edgar? Before I move on to my new philosophy here.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but I would have to agree, because if everybody's a woman, then you kind of take away its uniqueness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because if feminism is supposed to be a fight specifically for women in some way, you know, whether you're fighting to reach equality under the law with men or equality culturally with men or whatever, it still is based in that we're fighting for women in particular, because that's why it's feminism. It's not just humanism. And I think that men are entitled as well to have a movement for their issues too, because men have plenty of issues that they need to deal with. Men have a much higher suicide rate than women. Men die in the workplace way more often than women. Men have, their own unique diseases and cancers that they have to deal with. Like men have prostate cancer, women don't deal with that at all. But the idea that all it takes to be a woman is just to declare it, because that's the thing. It's not even just a matter of, oh, well, you've transitioned, you're presenting as a woman, and so I'll address you as a woman. It's gotten to the point where if you just, gender is so fluid that it could change, or some people at least advocate that it could change day by day. You could be a man one day, a woman the next day, neither the next day. But if that's the case, if anyone can just be a woman tomorrow, regardless of the biology, regardless of if they have actually experienced some of the things that make us a woman, like our unique biology, then, I don't know, the whole purpose of feminism kind of becomes moot. So, and there's some people online who say that we're actually in the fourth wave already, because there's a wave of feminism that's about like anti-bullying women online, sort of like there's this like technology wave. But I really think that that's more part of the third wave still, because the third wave's idea is that women are fragile and delicate and we need help and protection. Otherwise, well, not otherwise, like we just are victims because we live in a quote unquote patriarchal society and yada yada, right? So, so the idea that we have that women are getting harassed online, that's kind of all sort of the same idea. It's like women can't handle people being mean to them online. We need the government to step in. So watching this movement, it has been really troubling to me, because not only do they have this issue with biology that I just illustrated, where what it means to be a woman kind of gets erased, but also it's this whole dependency victimhood mentality. It's this idea that women are victims and we need the government to act in order for us to actually have our, for us to be able to compete with men or anything like that. The other thing that I really don't like about third wave feminism is that all of these women want to be like men, or a lot of them want to be like the men. They want to dress like men, they want to have their hair cut like men, they want to have careers like men, and I just don't understand what is feminist about that. If men and patriarchy are the problem, if masculinity is toxic, why are you trying to be masculine? It doesn't make any sense. So, with all of that being said, I'll stop criticizing third wave feminism, because there's plenty of that on the internet already. I don't need to spend more time doing that. You can just Google that. You'll find hours and hours of criticism in that regard. But I think it's time for a new wave of feminism. And I laid out 10 planks for what I think it would be the fourth wave of feminism. Maybe it's the fifth, but whatever. I'll just call it a new feminism for today. And so I just want to go through some of these and see what you guys think. The first plank is that femininity actually empowers women. It doesn't make us fragile. And actually, before I start going through these, I should point out that I think that the fourth wave of feminism should acknowledge that legally speaking, we have achieved equality with men. The next wave of feminism should not be about passing more laws. It should not be about, saying, oh, men are really the problem, if only we had more parental leave, or if only we had more paid time off, whatever. It's not about the government. It's about what it means to be a woman culturally in America. And so that's what I'm proposing here. So, plank number 1. Femininity empowers women. And this is just the truth. It's just the truth. Tim Pool recently was talking about some articles, and I went and looked them up myself, about some of these ultra woke feminists have started changing their political views because they can't get dates. So Mattress Girl, I don't know if you guys remember Mattress Girl, but Mattress Girl, the girl who strapped a mattress to her back claiming that she had been a victim of sexual assault on campus. It was all a lie, okay? But she was trying to illustrate her victimhood, you know, the patriarchy, yada, yada. But she has now started hanging out with libertarians and conservatives because she was finding that her woke philosophy, like she just couldn't get dates. She was striking out. And I do think that it's true, you know, and some people aren't going to like to hear this, but if you are seeking to have, if you want to attract a person who's interested in a woman, feminine qualities are attractive. That's what they're going to want. If you want a man who's interested in a woman or a lesbian who's interested in a woman, they still are going to want a woman who is feminine, because that is part of what makes a woman attractive. It's part of, there's a reason why women like to do their nails and wear high heels and have long hair. Like the stereotypes that I was talking about before originate in the fact that some of these feminine qualities actually do help us in the world. And I personally know that on days when I'm wearing a dress and when I have my nails done, I'm wearing my heels, you know, I tend to have a better interaction with the people that I deal with in the world. So, and this is just, it's not just a matter of attractiveness, but it is part of it. You know, if you're trying as a woman to present well, to look beautiful, to look elegant, you will actually be treated with much more respect by the men that you interact with, and women too, actually. So it's an empowering thing for women to be feminine. It doesn't make us fragile to be feminine. In fact, the people who claim that your femininity makes you fragile, I don't think have ever used their femininity and or gone into the world thinking about how is my attempted being feminine having an impact on the people I'm interacting with. So that's the first thing. Feminism should be about femininity, first and foremost, and I think that makes sense based on the term. So, the second plank, pride in motherhood. So, I don't know if you've noticed, but this is something Camille Paglia talks about too, is that the current wave of feminism, all of these women's studies, all of that, the only time that they talk about women's reproduction is in terms of abortion. They never want to talk about motherhood. They never want to talk about child rearing. They never want to talk about any of that. It's just the only thing empowering in their eyes in terms of a woman's fertility is abortion. It's the ability to kill her own offspring. That's what they think is empowering. Now, in my opinion, that's actually the exact opposite of both our evolutionary and our biological, of course, but also just in terms of our soulful, spiritual purpose on life. It turns a woman against her child, and that's the opposite of what we should be celebrating as women. As women, we should celebrate the fact that we can be mothers. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes us different than men, is that we can be mothers. And I don't know if you've thought about how powerful of a thing it is that women get to raise the next generation of humans. Even in the classic 50s style situation, right? Which I'm all on board with the second wave of feminism, right? But even in the 50s style situation, that housewife had way more power than she thought, because she was raising the children, and the children are the ones who end up controlling the world, right? Because they're not just raising the daughters, they're raising the sons too. So no one, in my opinion, I mean, obviously fathers have a huge role in the lives of their children, but no one has a bigger impact on child rearing than the mother. And as feminists, or the feminists that currently exist, have just completely, thrown up their hands and said, motherhood makes us weak, or motherhood will ruin our lives, or having children is a weakness, having children is a detriment to your life. But it's just really, it's not true. It's really biologically speaking, we have evolved to be prepared for our offspring, not for our own selves. Like the male body is evolutionarily designed to protect itself and to take care of itself. but the female body is evolutionarily designed to protect the offspring. For example, like my hands get pretty cold, like my circulation isn't great. But part of the reason for this and why a lot of women have poor circulation is there's a lot of heat that's kept right in your, like in your chest and in your internal organs, because if you're holding a baby in the cold, you have to be able to keep the baby warm here. So my body prioritizes just in case I'm holding an infant in terms of my like circulation. You know, these are things, there's other things too. Just during pregnancy, the female body starts to change and the hormones start to be released that instantly have you starting to be attached to the infant in your womb. So the female body is evolutionarily designed for motherhood. And it makes sense because we're the mothers. We're the ones who can give birth. We're the ones who can actually carry children. So it's the most powerful thing about being a woman. So we have to embrace it. We have to be proud of it. That's number 2. Number 3, freedom of choice and lifestyle. And this goes back to the second wave too a little bit, because they were fighting for this too. They were fighting for the right to not have to be housewives. They wanted to be in the public. They wanted to be in, have a career, be career women, all of that. But now we've gotten to a place where if you do choose to be a stay-at-home mom, feminists will sass you. Feminists will say that you're selling out to the patriarchy, or you're selling out your gender, or you're not living up to your potential. But I think that women should be able to choose whatever kind of life they want to pursue. That's part of being a feminist as well. It's liberty for women. So if you want to be a career woman, if you want to be a workaholic and not have kids and, just work and work and work, and that's where you get meaning, then that's up to you. But if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, if you want to just have the most awesome, clean house ever and just even homeschool your kids, whatever you want to do, that's your choice as a woman. And other women should not be judging you for making either of those choices or somewhere in between. So that's plank number 3. That one's pretty simple. Number 4, it's time for feminists to love and respect men and to acknowledge that men and women complement each other. And I don't mean compliment like, oh, you're looking good, but we actually have characteristics that are like a yin-yang. Neither sex is perfect. We both have our problems. My quote is always that men are stupid, but women are crazy, which I stand by to this day. But the truth is that feminism has gotten to a place where they just hate men. It's not even about being pro-woman all the time. It's just about hating men. It's about hating the patriarchy. It's about calling masculinity toxic. And truth be told, I just think that's nonsense. It's especially offensive to me for those women who say those things, or feminists who say those things, who have brothers, who have fathers. Maybe you don't like your brother or your father. That's a possibility, and maybe that's why you're a feminist. So maybe you've got some issues with that. But in general, the people who have done the most in my life to not just help my career, but to be mentors to me and all of that have been men. My father and my brother, I think, are some of the most admirable men that exist. And the idea that their masculinity is toxic is really disturbing to me. Like, I can't even wrap my head around that. So, men do amazing things for women. Women do amazing things for men too. But the idea that okay, we talk about a patriarchy, right? And it's true that for a long time, men held most of the power politically. And in business and things like that, although that's shifting. Most college students are women, more than 50% are women, in all fields, pretty much. But what was I talking about? Darn it, I lost my train of thought. Could you help me, Edgar?
You were getting into the patriarchy.
Oh, right. I can acknowledge that there has been some patriarchal aspects of the West in the past. But just to say that to say that that in and of itself is a negative is wrong. There are negative aspects to it, and there has been oppression of women. That's why these other waves of feminism were so necessary. But men also built Western civilization. I mean, who do you think's out there doing all the electricity work during a thunderstorm if a power line goes down? You know, who is managing all of our sewers? Who are our, who are the construction workers and the people dealing with our trash and building our water purification plants and our farmers? And, you know, obviously there's some women in there, but the vast majority of the individuals who make civilization possible, who make the electricity in this building possible, these cameras to be able to work, just basics like my car being able to function because of the gasoline that's in there. I mean, these are things that we owe to men. And I'm so grateful for men, all the men in my life. And especially, you know, I got married recently, and I'm so grateful for my husband. The idea that if him being masculine would be toxic, when that's actually what I was looking for in a husband, is just insane to me. It's like men who are masculine are the men that women are attracted to anyway. And that's part of the problem with third wave feminism too, because they've been telling men this whole time that what women want is a bunch of wimps. You know, a bunch of guys who I don't know, are just super kumbaya and will be nice and will cry, but that's not what women want. Women want, I mean, at least in my experience, even those who are feminists, women who are attracted to men want a man who, first of all, can take care of them, and second of all, you know, has some masculine features. Even feminist women, when they show them pictures of, you know, a guy in skinny jeans and a beanie, you know, a guy who you might say is a classic male feminist, and then you show him a guy who's wearing a cowboy hat and ripped, you know, maybe he's a little bit rugged and dirtied up. Even the feminists, even the most diehard feminists, will still say they're more attracted to the rugged cowboy than to the, you know, kind of feminist soy boy type. So we need to start respecting masculinity for the good things that masculinity provides us. Masculinity is what allows us to be protected from invaders. It's what drives firefighters to go put out fires in buildings. I mean, masculinity is very important. It's great. Men complement women. It's a yin-yang. That's plank number 4. Plank number 5 is acknowledging the power that women already have. And I think this is a big deal. One of the biggest issues I have with third wave feminism, like I mentioned, is that it's all about victimhood. It's all about how, oh, life is so hard for me. How, you know, I'm a woman. It's so hard. I'm so oppressed. It's such a struggle. But the truth is, women have plenty of power. We have plenty of power, ladies. Let's not even joke about that. I was talking earlier about how femininity empowers us. All right. I gotta say, in the sexual realm, in terms of who gets to select mates, I think that for the most part, women have the upper hand in that. And it's pretty obvious based on how Tinder works. You know, the studies that have been looking into the app Tinder, and for those of you who aren't familiar, although I'm sure most of my audience is, Tinder is an app basically where upon first impression of just a photo and a few things about a person, if you're interested in them, it's a dating app. If you're interested in them, you swipe right, and if you're not, you swipe left. So it basically encourages very shallow, instant, responses to people. But what Tinder has essentially done is made it so that women kind of can isolate all of the people that they're interested in into one group of, individuals who they matched. But men might swipe right 300 times and not get a match. And women might swipe right 300 times and get 300 matches. So
true. So true.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in. I just wonder if you've experienced this in your life. But I've done a lot of polls on my Twitter, specifically asking men about how their sex life is going, because I really think this current wave of feminism, first of all, it's messing up women's sex lives, because like I said, the ultra woke women haven't been able to get dates. But it's also messing up the men's sex lives because a lot of men, first of all, are trying to be male feminist types and women don't even want that. But it's gotten to a place where, women are pretending to be victims and having no power against men. Meanwhile, all of these men can't get laid at all. Not even a little bit. I did a poll and the vast majority of men who responded said that not only had they not had sex in the last month, but that it had been a really long time, and they don't even see how it could happen. And that was the majority of respondents. And when I asked a similar question for women, it wasn't as bad, but it was close. So people aren't getting together that much, and I really think that it's partially because of this feminism situation. But that was kind of a long rant, all to just say that women have much more power than we acknowledge. And it's true. Maybe we still haven't had a female president. Maybe there aren't as many female CEOs as there are men. But quite frankly, I would never want to be a CEO of a major company, like of a huge multinational company. You know how much stress that is? How many hours you have to work? I would never want to do that, even if someone offered that to me. But I don't know. We have to acknowledge that even if we don't have the quote-unquote power in terms of being president yet, I mean, Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House. That's the third most powerful person in the country in terms of if something happened to Donald Trump and Mike Pence, she would become the president. So we do have a woman there. But also, in terms of socially, women are super powerful, and we need to stop pretending like we're victims. We're not. We're very powerful. The women that I know, we're doing fine. We don't need the government to help us, and that's part of it. So let's see. Number 6, gun rights are women's rights. So this is something when I did my trigger warning podcast, we talked about that a lot with Antonia Okafor. Antonia, she switched her last name now, but anyway. I do think this is an important plank of the new wave of feminism because so many feminists these days are anti-Second Amendment, and this is just a travesty because gun rights help women more than any other group, period. And that's because of our unique biology, all right? I actually don't think that it's a problem that we are less, muscular by nature than men. We have all the same muscles, but their bone structure, their muscular structure, it just lends for men in general to be stronger than women on average. So if, like me, for example, okay, let's say I'm an attorney, so I have to work downtown some nights in terms of having networking events, something like that. So let's say I'm walking around downtown at night by myself. Now I won't say my exact weight because it's not cool for women to do that. But let's just say that I'm kind of dainty, okay? I've got bird limbs happening here. So if a 200-pound guy tried to rob me or mug me or tried to sexually assault me, all right, me with just my hands, there's nothing that I can do. There's just not. Even if I was the best at karate or something, I took jujitsu, some nonsense, it doesn't matter. These movies that show Charlize Theron, kicking ass in 5-inch heels. It's just not realistic. I mean, you might be able to take down a guy who really doesn't know how to fight or something like that. But the truth is that on average, a man is going to be able to overpower a woman. It's just true. And it is not worth risking your life or your safety by not carrying a weapon to just, to virtue signal oh, I can do anything that men can do. It's well, kind of, but that doesn't mean that you'll be able to beat a man in a fist fight or if a man's trying to overpower you. And that's not to say that there aren't some women out there who couldn't beat up a man. Trust me, there's women out there who could take on a guy. I'm not saying that there aren't. But for the vast majority of us, a gun is the great equalizer. What a gun does is it equalizes that weight distribution, that strength distribution, right? All of a sudden, All I have to do is take out my little revolver, and now that 200-pound guy will stop in his tracks if he knows what's good for him, because I'm actually quite a good shot. I go to the range pretty often. So if he knows what's good for him, he's not going to keep approaching me just by the mere brandishing of my weapon. And I think that it's important for women to acknowledge this. You know, when I lived in Massachusetts when I was in law school, and I think this is still the law there today, I'd have to double check, but when I lived there, you couldn't even carry pepper spray in the city limits of Boston. So not only could you not carry a gun without a permit, but I couldn't even have pepper spray. So what am I supposed to do, just blow a whistle? I gotta say, I don't think calling the cops is gonna prevent me getting raped within a minute. You know, it's just not gonna happen. So if we really are fierce, independent women, we need to embrace our right to bear arms, because that is what makes us so fierce and free. It's what makes us be able to walk at home at night with pride, and know that we're able to take care of ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean just go buy a gun and just have it, whatever. Learn how to use it, train with it, take a class with Guns for Everyone, learn how to use your weapon, because it matters. It's of no use to you if you can't use it, really. So, but as women, we've got to embrace our right to bear arms. It's what helps keep us safe, and we lose it at our peril, really. If feminists are worried about the patriarchy, just wait till what happens when we lose our guns. So really, it's a big deal. It affects minority women more than anyone, single mothers more than anyone. We've got to be able to protect our homes, protect our children. Again, be proud in your motherhood. If you are a mother, you should be able to protect your children in your home. So you should be able to use a firearm to protect your house, all of that good stuff. Let's see. Protection of our offspring. So I'm going to talk about the property argument about abortion in a little bit. But I want to talk about it in terms of feminism right now. And I don't know, this is just, abortion's always tricky territory. But I think that as women feminists, we should be culturally pro-life. Now, what I mean by that is, I don't think that we necessarily should be out there fighting for laws banning abortion. But I think that as women, abortion should just be unthinkable to us. It shouldn't even cross our minds as an option if we become pregnant. We shouldn't have to defund Planned Parenthood by having Congress do that. Congress is so incompetent anyway. Even if we've had both chambers of Congress be Republicans, and they've never done anything to really change abortion laws or anything to be pro-life anyway. But what we should do is just, the only reason why abortionists can make money is because women are choosing to have abortions. That's why. So we should make this unthinkable. And the reason why it should be unthinkable is because a mother should never want to kill her offspring, regardless of how that offspring comes into being. And I believe this even in the case of rape and incest as well. I've watched a lot of videos of, YouTube's an amazing place, but I've watched a lot of videos of women who were raped, even women who were raped at like disturbingly young ages, at like 14. But they chose either to keep the baby and raise it together with their parents, in the case of some of the younger children who were raped. It's such a tragedy. It's just so heartbreaking to hear these stories. But there's also some who, carried the baby to term and then gave it up for adoption. And then there's some who were adults. There was this one story I listened to. It was just so, I couldn't believe it. This woman, she would give like fitness lessons on cruise ships. And she got back to her room one night and she opened the door and there was just a man standing in there. And she was like, "Can I help you?" And he bashed her over the head with a vase and proceeded to violate her, rape her for like all night, like 8 hours. It was really disturbing. And she became pregnant with this. This woman was married at the time. She had 3 children of her own already. And she went through this. But what's incredible to me is that the women who kept their child after the rape felt healing from that child. And the child who is alive is so incredibly grateful for their life because they know that the vast majority of times that if a woman becomes pregnant through a rape, sorry, that's my phone going off. At least in America, the vast majority of times, if a woman becomes pregnant as the result of a rape, not only will she be encouraged to have an abortion, but she probably will have one. But the women who I listened to who had an abortion after a rape, they were harmed twice because they lost, well, first of all, they were raped, and that's a horrible crime, a horrible act of violence against that woman. But then they have to endure the trauma of the abortion too. Because abortions, it's not even just that they're medically easy. Hundreds of women have died from having abortions just in Planned Parenthood too. So there's physical trauma there's psychological trauma from the realization that, you know, your offspring has been killed, and there's no healing. But the women who kept their baby, what they see is that even though something horrible happened to them, something good could come out of it, and that is their new child. And I think that we as women should never turn against our children. It goes hand in hand with taking pride in motherhood. Even if our child came into being as a result of something horrible, it is still our child, and it is like, as mothers, evolutionarily, spiritually, you know, just morally, we should never, ever turn against our children, ever. So no matter how it came into being. And in my opinion, all that does in the case of a rape is make 2 victims instead of 1. So I really think that we as women need to start embracing this. And the vast majority of the leaders of the pro-life movement are women. People don't want to say that. But it's true. And I want to address something else, which is that abortion is actually never medically necessary to save a woman's life. And let me explain what I mean by that. There may be times when a pregnancy is threatening a woman's life. But when that's the case, what you do is deliver the baby, even if the baby is premature, and you try to keep the baby alive as best as you can. That's what a doctor does. That's what they should do under their Hippocratic oath. Because there should be this idea, right, that doctors will do no harm. That's part of their oath when they become doctors. So what they should try to do is keep that baby alive instead of just aborting it. The abortion itself is never medically necessary for a woman's life to be saved. Now, some people will say, well, what about ectopic pregnancies? And if you don't know, an ectopic pregnancy is when the egg implants in the fallopian tube. So you can't actually develop a lot of the stuff that the baby would need to be able to grow in your body. Like the placenta can't develop and all of that. And in those instances, it's true that you know, the poor little fetus who got implanted in the fallopian tube has to be removed. But that is actually not considered to be an abortion, medically speaking, because it's not actually a viable fetus. That fetus will die no matter what because of where it was implanted, and that legitimately threatens the mother's life. But even in those instances, it's still not called an abortion because it is not the intentional killing of a viable human fetus. It is the removal of an ectopic pregnancy, which would always lead to a miscarriage and actually would threaten the mother's life. But that's not an abortion, just to be clear. So I just think that women have been told an awful lot of lies about abortion, because abortion is actually not medically safe for women. It traumatizes women. I've heard horrible stories about, because, you know, they don't actually do ultrasounds a lot of the times when they're performing an abortion. So the doctor's just up in there blind with tools. And so women have had their uteruses pierced, you know, just horrible complications from an abortion. So it's not safe. They don't have to be performed in hospitals anymore. I mean, they have just removed, like, you know, the basic regulations that they have in place just to go, you know, get antibiotics for, you know, being sick or something like that are more strict than what it takes to have a doctor go and do a major surgical operation inside of a woman's uterus that ends a human life. And I just think that we as women, we should never turn against our kids. That's number one. But also, an abortion is a premeditated ending of an innocent human life. And we as women should not be in favor of that. We should be the compassionate sex, right? So killing our offspring is really not in line with that, in my opinion. There's nothing feminine about killing your offspring anyway. Okay, getting through these. And I have 10 because, I don't know, when you do planks, you should have 10. So plank number 8 is respect for our body, mind, and spirit. And this is really just to say that all of this idea that like you're healthy at any weight or, you know, I don't know, just the idea that you can kind of let yourself go and it just doesn't matter. It's like, no, we as women should care about our bodies because our bodies are a gift. It's part of what makes us a woman is how our bodies are. So we should respect it. We should stay fit. We should eat well. We should treat our bodies well because we're not victims. We're empowered women who love the gifts that we have. We love our talents. We love our treasures, and that includes our body and our mind. So keep yourself healthy and all of that. I don't think that feminism should be anything about you're fine the way you are. You don't have to improve. Don't better yourself. No, we should try to be the best woman we could be, and that includes our body, our mind, all of that. Try to be well. The 9th plank is pride in managing a home and family. And this one kind of gets into some stuff I was talking about before. But I think that we need to stop pretending that all the stuff that the women do, or that women do around the house, or historically women have done around the house, is worthless. Because it's really not. Maintaining a household, managing laundry, managing food, raising kids. I mean, even, can you fold a fitted sheet, Edgar?
Fold, very, very loosely stated.
Right, yeah, fold is in quotes. But I mean, these things are actually very much valuable. If you have a house in disarray, I mean, I personally just can't even relax in a house that's a hot mess. And it actually takes a lot of effort to maintain all of that stuff. I mean, I'm finding now that I am a wife, I mean, obviously, I'm not in a situation where I'm being a housewife all the time, but you know, I want to keep a good home for my husband, and it takes a lot of work. But this stuff is all very valuable. If that stuff didn't get done, I mean, how would our kids be raised? It all goes back to that. So take pride in the fact that you can run a home, that you can manage a family. Like, raising kids is a big deal. We should be proud of this. It is not a matter of weakness to be a housewife. It's actually a very empowering thing. And lastly, and this is kind of a two-part one, but entrepreneurship empowers women, and women don't need the government, period. That's plank number 10. So a lot of women I know are entrepreneurs, and it's partially because it gives you the freedom to set your own schedule. So if you do want to be a mother where you can, you know, take your kids to school, you can go to all of their soccer games or whatever, or even if you just want to be empowered enough to not have to answer to a man, so to speak, if that's really your issue, then you should be an entrepreneur. So many women talk about this issue with how there's not that many CEOs that are women. But the truth is, if you want to be the CEO of a company, you should start one. Right? If you want to own a company, start one. Instead of starting at the bottom, working your way up, begging someone to hire you, and eventually getting your name on the wall, just put your name on the wall. Start with your name on the wall. That's up to you. And because women have these opportunities to be entrepreneurs, this whole idea that we need the state to give us welfare and all of these checks and like, I don't know, that we need more checks for single mothers, and we need more welfare for, I don't know, anyone who is struggling as a woman, that we need to go to the government to solve our problems is just ridiculous. We are very self-sufficient individuals. We can make our own money. We don't need, there's nothing that requires a man in order to become wealthy as a woman. And I think that watching Shark Tank has really convinced me of that. Barbara Cochran is my favorite shark. But she's a gal who had a partner, a business partner who was a man, and she was romantically involved with him and all of that. But he left her for his secretary, something like that, and said that she would never be successful without him. But she used that to motivate her and is now, obviously she's on Shark Tank, but I mean, the woman's worth like millions and millions of dollars. She has invested in all these companies. I mean, she has made so many other people wealthy. And it was all because someone told her that she couldn't do it. And she was motivated to do it herself. And I believe that of all women. I've also been reading about Coco Chanel. She's one of my personal heroes. And, she's one of these reasons too why, again, abortion shouldn't even be a question. Because Coco Chanel was an orphan. Coco Chanel grew up in an orphanage, and the only reason why she could even sew was because the nuns in her orphanage taught her how to sew. That was like all she could do. And Coco Chanel is responsible for the vast majority of fashion in the last 100 years. I mean, any little black dress you have is because of Coco Chanel. And she made her way from an orphan to being the most iconic fashion designer practically ever. So if she can do it, you can too. And that's my 10th plank of feminism. So I don't know, I would love to hear what you guys think. Maybe I'll try to see if I can see the live chat because I haven't been able to this whole time. But it might not happen. No, it's still not showing up on here. So with that being the case, I've already talked about abortion a little bit. But actually, what do you think, Edgar? Do you think that feminism would be better? Or would you not hate feminists like that?
In retrospect, I mean, obviously I wasn't alive in the 60s and the 50s. But obviously one would prefer that feminism over what we got right now. But I suspect that if we did live in the 50s and the 60s, we'd probably say, like, nah, we don't like this feminism that's going on right now. Because it's pretty extreme. Me personally, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough. I like more of a traditional marriage. I just do.
Me too.
But that's kind of hard nowadays, and it's weird. But I see this more in white men than I do in anything else, where they're very feminine. So they're the ones that do all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the.
Yeah, it's been happening a lot more.
Yeah. So I think that feeds it as well. But I don't know. Overall.
Yeah, I mean.
It's tough.
It's true. When I asked my Twitter about this, I had a lot of people saying, because legal parity has been reached between men and women, that, like, we don't need a new feminism at all. Like, we should just stop. But I think that the current wave of feminism is so bad that we need like a course correction feminism from what they're trying to push because if we actually don't, I do think it's important that there's people fighting for women's issues. But if the people fighting for women's issues can't even define what a woman is, then we're in big trouble. So, I don't know. That's kind of my whole thinking on it. But yeah, I don't think that we need to be advocating for legal changes. I just think that a lot of women don't feel like they can even be part of the current wave of feminism. And I certainly don't, even though I care about women's issues a lot. And I think the gun rights part is particularly, the gun rights and the motherhood aspect is particularly important because...
I think only white females can be part of the... Because if you really look at it, as of late, it almost seems like... Because I've gotten this from certain people, and if I really dissect it, it's typically been pretentious white lady females who have told me how to feel about my culture and my heritage and how I should speak about who I am. Like it's me. I don't give a shit about what you're saying about because it's me. Like I don't know how
Right.
you want me to feel about myself. Or they would tell my wife, oh, you've got to do this and you got to do that. Like, she's like, no, this is me. Like, how about you mind your own fucking business?
Right? Yeah, it's bad because, yeah, it's a lot of, like, in particular, a lot of wealthy white feminists like to tell, like, women of color that we're not being a woman right. And or they want to tell other women who are, just happen to disagree with them on any issue that they're not being a woman. Like, if you disagree with their political ideology, then you're a traitor to your sex. Yeah. And that's just crazy, man. Because women should be, the idea that women wouldn't be able to think for themselves or think differently, I mean, you're basically just saying that all women think alike, and that seems kind of sexist to me. So, in any event. But let's move on to my property manifesto, and abortion is a particular issue.
So I got a comment from Isaac.
Oh, sure. Hi, Isaac.
He says to tell women to become your own CEO is great advice. That way you know if you're actually capable of doing it before you go telling other people whether or not they deserve the spot.
Right. Or before you can go tell people that the person or the fry cook at McDonald's works harder than the CEO of McDonald's. It's like, maybe try to be a CEO and run a company and have it so for years the only person who doesn't get paid is you. Yeah, because that's how it starts. It's like everyone has to get paid first, and then you can get whatever's left. But for a long time, that's nothing, or it might be negative. And so, to the extent that you can become really wealthy as an entrepreneur, it's only after so much work and struggle to get customers and to build a brand. And, it's not easy to start a company and make it really successful. And yeah, I agree. So it's not just women. Anyone, like socialists and stuff, go start a company, see how easy it is for you to make a lot of money, and then come back and tell me. So yeah. Okay, so the property manifesto. So I'm just going to make a property-based argument against abortion. And this is probably going to be something that you've never thought of before and haven't heard of before, so bear with me, okay? And we're going to talk about some property things as applied to real property and then apply them to abortion. So the first thing I want to talk about is something called trespass by necessity. This case in America became very famous. It's called Vincent v. Lake Erie. And this was ruled on by the Minnesota Supreme Court way back in 1910. So what happened in Vincent v. Lake Erie essentially is one shipping company owned a dock, in Minnesota, and another boat came in during a big storm and docked on their, attached or anchored their boat to their dock. Okay, so the whole issue was, though, that in doing that, they actually kind of roughed up this person's dock. Like their boat kind of banged into it or something. And so they caused damage to the person's dock by, hooking up their ship there. So the person who owned the dock sued saying, I want damages for the damage that you did to my boat. Or excuse me, to my dock. If I could actually speak this well, it would make more sense, right? Let me start over. Okay. There's a big storm. Guy in a boat is like, oh my gosh, I need to dock somewhere. He sees a dock. He hooks his boat up to that. That dock is owned by someone else who gets upset because in the docking process, damage is done to the dock. Okay? That's better. Whew, got that out in one go. Okay, now, it's a long case. It's written in like Old English because it was written in 1910. But first of all, the main holding that you learn in law school is that if you trespass on someone's land and you damage their property, you have to pay those damages. And that's oftentimes what people focus on in terms of this case. But there's another holding in this case that I think is really interesting, which is that In the event of necessity, if someone trespasses on your land and expelling them from your land at that time will cause that person to die, right? Like in this instance, the storm was so bad that if the person who owned the dock had forced the boat owner to go back out into the lake or whatever, that it probably would have killed him. Like the storm was that bad. So part of what the court said was, listen, we understand that they were trespassing, but you can't kick them off your land if kicking them off your land is going to kill them. You have to wait for the storm to pass, and then you can tell them to go. And they'll be liable for whatever damages they did during their trespass. Okay? So that's sort of the basics of trespass by necessity. It's sort of this idea like, yeah, you're trespassing, but we understand that why you're doing it. You're trespassing because to not do so will mean that you're going to die. And in that instance, they're allowed to trespass on your land as long as the threat to their life persists. Okay, so that's kind of that doctrine. And it sort of makes sense, right? We also have rules as well where you can't use unnecessary force against a trespasser. Like you can't just have a bear trap in your yard in case someone walks through. They have to kind of be threatening you in some way for you to use lethal force. Now, if they break into your house in the middle of the night, then that's kind of a different situation. But you can't have like booby traps laid for people just because they're coming on your property. It's like you have to have equal force to what your threat is. So if someone's just trespassing, you can't kill them for just trespassing. They have, it has to be more than that. That's kind of the basics there. So let's talk about property of body for a second, okay? So the woman owns her body, right? And that means she owns her uterus, and she has the right to control and exclude from that. That's part of why rape is a crime, right? You have the right to exclude from your body. But here's some things about property law. You can't, okay, before we even get into the trespass by necessity, let's talk about a case like not rape or incest, but just, maybe you had a one-night stand and you get pregnant after that, okay? That's a case of voluntary intercourse. And there's a doctrine in torts that basically says that you're responsible for the probable consequences of your behavior. And let me give you an example of that. So I'm sitting in this chair right now. But let's say before I sat in it, Edgar was like, oh, let me get this chair for you. And right before I sat down, he pulled it out from under me, and I fell down, and I hurt myself or whatever. So Edgar could say oh, well, but I didn't push her. I didn't knock her down. But legally speaking, he would be responsible for my injuries because he knew that by pulling the chair out from under me that I was going to fall. Okay? So you're responsible for the probable consequences of your actions. Now, maybe Edgar will disagree with me, but one of the probable consequences of having intercourse, especially if you're not using protection, is pregnancy. So in my opinion, in terms of a trespass, in instances of having voluntary intercourse, the baby is not even a trespasser, just to make that clear. The baby was invited there voluntarily because it's the probable consequence of your actions of having sex. And even if you are using protection, condoms break, birth control doesn't always work, pregnancy is still always a possible result and kind of a probable result of having intercourse. So the only way to really make sure is to not have sex. And if you're, that's kind of a thing. So in my opinion, it's not even a trespass at that point. To expel a baby in that instance would just be outright. That would basically be like killing someone who you invited into your house, property-wise. But the reason why I spent that whole time talking about trespass by necessity is because I do want to talk about instances of rape or incest, because that is a little different. You didn't invite that into your body, right? In fact, you wanted to exclude that from your body. And because of, I don't know, maybe it was I don't know, maybe you should have had a gun. But in any event, but because you weren't able to successfully exclude, you became pregnant. And the same thing with incest, because in my opinion, that really is like an involuntary situation. But even in that instance, what you have is a trespass by necessity, at least until the baby is viable. So, in that instance, okay, you have a baby who is now in your womb. You didn't want it there. You didn't have a say in that. It might have some physical impacts on your body, which is your property. But to expel the baby prior to its viability outside of the womb would be to basically, violate this whole doctrine under trespass by necessity, wherein the damages that are being caused to your property should not trump a human life. And you can't expel someone from your property just because they're a trespasser. So, now maybe there could be some legal situation where, to the extent that it was caused by rape or incest, there could be some damages paid to the woman, not necessarily by the baby, because it's really not the baby's fault that they're there either, but maybe by the rapist or the whatever family member committed the incest. They could pay, monetary damages for the, however they would want to monetize the harm to the woman's body for having to carry a baby at least up until viability, or at least up until the baby could be delivered and exist outside of the womb. Because that is kind of the doctrine. It's like if there's damages done as the result of the trespass, then those damages can be compensated for. And I do think that a victim of a rape who becomes pregnant should have some compensation for the fact that they're carrying a baby that was the result of a violation of their property of body. But this is kind of a separate thing, but the crimes of your father should not mean that you get the death penalty. So, maybe your father was a rapist, but that doesn't mean that you don't deserve to live. Maybe you're a baby that's in that womb as the result of a violation of someone's property rights, which is what a trespass is. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a right to your life. And damage to property is not, should not be prioritized over the value of human life, ever, in my opinion. And I think that given that you own your body, it makes sense to apply these property law doctrines to it. It's like if I have a trespasser in my property of body, when am I allowed to expel them and in what conditions? And the truth is, it's like practically in any condition as long as they could survive. So it could be a situation where, babies are viable at like 22 weeks now. And it could be a situation where instead of getting an abortion, what you do is you carry it for that 22 weeks. And then once they're at a place where they can be viable outside of the womb, you have a C-section or an early delivery or something. And then you go through the adoption process. But you should never end a human life because of damage to your property. And that's in effect what's happening in an abortion. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Edgar, or if people in the live chat said anything.
No.
No? Okay, cool. But it's just something to think about. I feel like so many people talk about abortion like, oh no, it's about the woman's right to choose, and then it's like, oh, it's just about the baby's life. But it really is, there's competing issues there. There's two lives happening, and there's actually two bodies, right? Because the baby owns its body too. It has a right to live. So, and it has a right to expel from its body, and to decide its own fate in terms of its life. So that is the property manifesto as it pertains to abortion. Feel free to comment on this. I'm sorry that I can't see the live chat. And I will just finish out with the story about Saint Valentine. So Valentine's Day is actually Saint Valentine's it's his saint day in the church calendar. And so many people, like I said at the beginning of this, say that Valentine's Day is just, it's just a corporate holiday, which in many ways it has kind of become that because of all the candy and the little Valentine's Day stuff at school where you have to buy a Valentine for everyone in class. And women, if men don't do Valentine's Day right, get mad and all of this stuff. But St. Valentine's kind of interesting. He was a Roman priest during a time where Claudius was the emperor. And you weren't allowed to get married unless you were of a certain age. Like, they had a prohibition on young people getting married, but then simultaneously there was a situation where you could be like a polygamist. Like, you could have 5 wives, but if you were too young, you couldn't get married. And I'm not talking about like so young where it would be really inappropriate, but teenagers, and especially in this time, like in more ancient Roman times, but like teenagers couldn't get married even if they wanted to. But what St. Valentine did was he basically performed marriages that were illegal under Emperor Claudius's reign, and so he kind of is the patron saint for lovers because he helped do marriages when the emperor said that it wasn't okay. So then in 269 AD, Valentine was sentenced to a 3-part execution for doing these marriages. First by beating, then by stoning, and then by decapitation. And he was martyred. And he was martyred for marrying couples who wanted to be together. It's pretty amazing. But one thing that St. Valentine talked about, though, was that part of love is also suffering. And that is true because love is amazing. It has so much joy in it in a lot of ways. But love also is suffering because to love someone is to be capable of also losing someone or being harmed by them, because it's always the people that you know the best or the closest to you that could hurt you. And losing someone that you love or going through hard times with someone that you love, it can really hurt. I don't know. It can really affect you more than anything. But Valentine would say that these struggles in your relationships, if you do go through trials in your relationship, that ultimately getting through those things, especially through the help and love of Christ, that you'll actually be stronger in your relationship for it. So the reason why we celebrate Valentine's Day, or why we started, or why he has a feast day, is because he's the patron saint of lovers. So that's why it's a love holiday. But also because just remember that St. Valentine risked his life to help young couples get married and to help young couples foster their love. So that's why we celebrate Valentine's Day. I know it's hard, it is really corporatized these days. It's all about candy and roses and whatever. But just try to think about it as a day that's really based on, first of all, suffering for the sake of love, which is what St. Valentine did. He was put to death for the sake of love. And also that it's worth risking. It's worth risking your life for love. So that's what Valentine's Day is all about. I hope you all have a great Valentine's Day, and thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I want to thank Guns for Everyone for sponsoring this podcast. They're the ones who really make this podcast possible, especially Edgar. So if you live in Colorado and you want to get a concealed carry permit, or if you want to take a class to help learn how to use your firearm, especially women, we got to know how to use them. Online, and please take a class with them, or you can go to their standalone shop and buy a firearm there as well. So thank you so much, Edgar. If you want to support this podcast, you can become a patron at Patreon. It's patreon.com/Nina Down the Rabbit Hole. Thank you so much to my first patron, of course, Brett Ralston. I always appreciate the donation that you give me. But really, if you want to support this channel more than anything, just share this video with anyone you would think would like to see it. And I hope you all have a great night. Live free, everyone. Bye.